Title 5. Dark Truths About Feminine Power. Men Secretly Fear. Carl Jung. Have you ever wondered why certain women ignite both longing and terror in a man's heart? Why her presence alone can unravel his certainty, bend his pride, and expose the fragile structure of his ego? Carl Jung once said that the feminine holds within it the secret key to man's unconscious, a mirror that reflects not only his desires, but also the shadows he has tried so desperately to bury. And it is in this mirror that the darkest truths of feminine power are revealed, truths men do not speak of, yet secretly fear. The first truth is silence. Not the silence of passivity, but the silence that speaks louder than rage, the silence that refuses to feed his ego. When a woman chooses silence, she dismantles the game of words and control. Men are conditioned to expect reaction, anger, pleading, justification, because reaction confirms their significance. But the silent woman withdraws the mirror, leaving him face to face with his own emptiness. The Stoics warned of the terror of facing oneself, and so does Jung. Man dreads the vacuum where no echo of his dominance returns. This silence is not weakness. It is the abyss of feminine power, and in that abyss, many men fall apart. The second truth is detachment. A man secretly fears the woman who does not need him, because she exposes the illusion that his worth is tied to her dependence. Imagine the man whose entire sense of importance rests on being the center of a woman's life, and then imagine that woman stepping back, calm and unbothered, as if she has already built a world without him. Detachment slices into the male ego more deeply than rejection, for rejection still acknowledges him, but detachment erases him. Jung called this the collapse of projection, when the woman no longer serves as the canvas for his ideals and insecurities. The man is left staring into the cracks of his own soul. The third truth is the shadow. Feminine power has always been linked with mystery, with the hidden realm of intuition and emotion that men cannot fully enter. In Jungian psychology, the anima, the feminine within the male unconscious, is both his guide and his greatest threat. When a woman embodies her depth without apology, when she becomes the shadow he cannot possess, she awakens his own anima, forcing him to confront desires, vulnerabilities, and fears he has spent his life denying. This is why some men will brand such women as dangerous, witches, or sirens, not because she holds dark magic, but because she illuminates the darkness within him. The fourth truth is refusal. To refuse a man, especially when he expects access, to a woman's time, body, or emotional labor, is to strike at the very core of patriarchal entitlement. He may not say it aloud, but deep down, he fears the woman who knows how to say no without explanation. The refusal is not just denial of him. It is affirmation of her boundaries, her autonomy, her sovereignty. Seneca once wrote that true strength lies in self-possession. A woman who embodies this truth stands beyond a man's attempts to conquer. Her refusal reminds him of the limits of his reach, and nothing bruises the ego more than a door that cannot be opened by force. The fifth and perhaps darkest truth is transcendence. Feminine power terrifies men most when it transforms into something uncontainable, when a woman no longer defines herself by male desire at all. She becomes a force, an archetype, a mystery beyond romance and beyond validation. Such transcendence reminds a man that his control, his charm, his strategies are finite. Jung would call this individuation the process of becoming whole, integrating light and shadow, and stepping into the fullness of being. For a man who has built his identity on being the axis of a woman's life, witnessing her transcendence is like witnessing his own death, and so he fears it because it reminds him of impermanence, of powerlessness, of the truth that love cannot be possessed. Now consider this. When you, as a woman, embody these truths, you awaken something dangerous in him. Not because you harm him, but because you show him a version of himself he has never dared to confront. He may desire you obsessively, he may attempt to control you, or he may flee from you entirely. But beneath it all, he knows. It is your power, not his, that governs the unspoken space between you. Type, continue, to receive the next part. The feminine that men secretly fear is not the gentle muse of his fantasies, but the mirror that does not lie. Once he looks into her presence, his shadow begins to stir. Jung taught that every man projects onto women what he cannot accept in himself: his tenderness, his vulnerability, his hunger, his chaos. When a woman stands unshaken, when she refuses to dissolve into those projections, she shatters the veil. He is forced to see that what he accused her of, emotionality, irrationality, weakness, are often the very qualities he has buried deep in his unconscious. The fear he feels in her presence is not about her at all. It is about himself. Watch closely how a man reacts when he meets a woman who cannot be consumed. At first he is intoxicated. Her mystery is like water he cannot drink enough of. He studies her silence, her depth, her refusal to compete for his attention. She is both near and unreachable. But soon, intoxication turns to agitation. He begins to ask questions. Why doesn't she need me? Why doesn't she react the way others do? Why is her energy not in my hands? The agitation is his ego realizing, it is not the master here. The woman who carries herself with dignity, with detachment, has already stripped away his armor without a single word. Men are not trained to withstand this kind of power. Society has told them stories where the woman is conquered, where her worth blooms only under his gaze. Yet feminine power does not bloom under ownership. It blooms in freedom. And here lies the paradox that terrifies him. The freer she is, the more magnetic she becomes. Jung would call this archetypal energy, the anima fully awakened, a force that draws him, yet resists his possession. He cannot fully understand why his obsession deepens the moment she withdraws, but deep inside he knows. His desire is not for her body, it is for the wholeness she represents, a wholeness he cannot reach without facing his own shadow. This is why silence hurts more than anger. Anger can be fought, debated, countered, but silence places the burden on him. It forces him to hear his own words echo back into the void. Many men cannot tolerate this void. They fill it with noise, arguments, manipulation, seduction, distractions, anything to drown out the sound of themselves. Yet the woman who chooses silence hands him a mirror so polished he cannot look away. And what he sees is not her rejection, but his dependence. Do you see the danger you hold when you no longer chase? A man's fear of being irrelevant is not about losing you. It is about losing himself. For if he cannot control, cannot predict, cannot claim, then his constructed identity collapses. Carl Jung insisted that the process of individuation requires this collapse, that a man must be broken by the very archetypes he resists. In truth, many men fear women not because of what women do, but because of what women reveal, the hollowness of borrowed strength, the fragility of an ego built on conquest, the terrifying call of the unconscious asking to be made whole. Consider the countless myths of history. Men driven to madness by sirens, kings undone by queens, warriors lured into ruin by the touch of a woman they could never fully possess. These were not stories of women as villains, but of men facing what they could not control, the feminine as chaos, as depth, as shadow. And though society tried to brand these women dangerous, the truth is simpler. They were powerful because they refused to be small. You too carry this archetypal force. When you step into your silence, your detachment, your refusal, your transcendence, you embody the truths men fear, but secretly crave. You remind them that love is not submission, that attraction is not ownership, and that true intimacy requires confronting the darkness within. And so, when he stares at you with both desire and dread, understand this: it is not you he fears losing, it is the fragments of himself that crumble in your presence. Type continue to receive the next part. Title: There is a peculiar cruelty hidden inside the feminine power that does not bend. Not cruelty in action, but in revelation. For when a woman stands rooted in her essence, when she will not lower herself to be chosen, she forces a man to confront the naked truth of his own incompleteness. Jung spoke often of the archetypal split within the psyche. Man carries within him an unacknowledged feminine, just as woman carries a masculine counterpart. Most men, however, resist this feminine within. They build armor out of dominance, out of conquest, out of silence disguised as strength. But when a woman embodies her wholeness, when she mirrors his unlived anima, she tears the armor open. What he has buried beneath ambition, aggression, and arrogance is suddenly exposed. This is why obsession often follows detachment. A man who feels his ego dissolving in the presence of a woman's sovereignty will cling tighter, chase harder, attempt to manipulate reality back into a place where he feels secure. Yet the harder he grasps, the more elusive she becomes. For her power is not in resistance, but in transcendence. She is not fighting him, she is simply beyond him. The Stoics knew this well. Epictetus warned that no man can truly possess another soul, only himself. The woman who lives this truth becomes untouchable, even when desired, even when adored. There is a psychological terror that stirs when a man realizes his influence cannot bend her. The usual tools, charm, seduction, intimidation, withdrawal, fail. She does not yield, not because she is cold, but because her worth no longer lives in his hands. Jung called this the liberation of the self, when the feminine ceases to be an object of projection and emerges as her own full archetype. For the man still chained to his ego, this is unbearable. He may call her cruel, unfeeling, arrogant. But beneath his accusations lies fear, the fear that she has touched a realm he cannot enter without dismantling himself first. This is the paradox of feminine power. It both draws him and destroys him. He is fascinated by the mystery, intoxicated by her refusal, captivated by her silence. But at the same time, he feels disarmed, diminished, destabilized. The woman he cannot conquer becomes the measure of his own inadequacy. And so his fear is disguised as criticism, as anger, as dismissal. He will call her too much, too complicated, too independent. He does not see that what he truly fears is not her, but the absence of power she reveals in him. Have you noticed how quickly admiration turns to hostility when a man realizes he cannot control you? The same mouth that once praised your uniqueness now curses your defiance. This is the language of a fragile ego collapsing. A man will rarely admit that he feels powerless. Instead, he masks it with blame. Jung's shadow theory teaches that what we hate in others often mirrors what we repress within ourselves. So when he calls you cold, he hides his own lack of warmth. When he calls you dangerous, he confesses his own weakness. When he calls you unloving, he reveals his inability to love without control. And yet, beneath this turbulence, there is a deeper truth. Some men secretly crave this destruction. They long for the woman who will not yield because unconsciously they know she holds the key to their transformation. The man who dares to endure her silence, her refusal, her transcendence may find himself stripped bare, but in that nakedness, he can finally meet himself. He may resist it, he may rage against it, but part of him recognizes that this confrontation is the gateway to wholeness. For you, the lesson is clear. Your power does not lie in making yourself easier to love, in softening your edges to be chosen, in sacrificing silence for validation. Your power lies in the refusal to abandon yourself. Jung knew that individuation is not a path for the weak. It demands that one face loneliness, rejection, misunderstanding. But it is the only path that leads to authenticity. And when you walk, men will fear you. Not because you harm them, but because you awaken them. So let them fear. Their fear is not your burden. Their obsession is not your problem. You are not here to soothe the male ego or to serve as the container for his projections. You are here to embody the fullness of the feminine, to walk in silence when words are wasted, to detach when your spirit calls for freedom, to refuse what diminishes you, and to transcend what seeks to own you. A woman rooted in her essence becomes an unmovable storm, not because she destroys, but because she reveals. Men are taught to crave women who bend, who soothe their wounds, who absorb their tempests. Yet when he meets a woman who will not shrink, something ancient awakens in him. It is the primal fear of being seen without disguise, stripped of armor, exposed not as a conqueror but as a child still lost within his own shadow. Jung called this confrontation with the unconscious the great trial, for it is not the world outside that undoes him, but the mirror within a woman's gaze that reflects what he has long denied. Such a woman embodies paradox. She is nurturing, but not endlessly, giving but never depleted, soft but never weak. To the man who clings to his ego, she feels like danger. Why? Because she cannot be controlled, not by praise, not by punishment, not by promises. Her compass is internal, not external. She does not dance to the rhythm of his validation, and in this, she unsettles the very foundation of his sense of worth. For if she does not revolve around him, then perhaps he is not the center of the universe at all. And this thought terrifies him more than rejection ever could. This is why silence burns deeper than insults. Words can be deflected, reinterpreted, drowned in argument. Silence leaves no room for escape. When she refuses to answer, when she no longer explains, justifies, or defends, he feels his own words collapse into a void. The silence whispers, "Your power over me is gone." In this moment, the man feels his own dependency laid bare. He is addicted not to her body, but to her energy, to the validation she once gave. And when she withholds it, he realizes the truth. His strength was never strength, only borrowed from her attention. But the most dangerous feminine weapon is not silence, nor even detachment. It is sovereignty, the refusal to be defined by his gaze at all. When a woman transcends the cycle of validation, when she steps into her own archetypal power, she no longer plays the game of attraction and rejection. She becomes something else entirely, a presence, a force, a living reminder of freedom. Men who cling to ego cannot understand this kind of woman, for she moves beyond the binary of desire and fear. She is not here to be chosen, she is here to choose, and yet, paradoxically, it is this transcendence that magnetizes men most deeply. The more sovereign she becomes, the more he obsesses, for she awakens his anima, the feminine within his unconscious. And the anima is not content with shallow love. It demands depth, transformation, even dissolution. He wants her, yet fears her. He desires her, yet resents her. He cannot hold her, yet he cannot let her go. This is the cycle Jung saw repeated endlessly. The man chasing the woman who mirrors, his shadow, the woman holding the mirror, until he either shatters or awakens. Do you see, then, why men both idolize and vilify powerful women? One moment she is a goddess to be worshipped, the next, a witch to be condemned. This duality is not about her nature. It is about his inability to reconcile the split within himself. The goddess is his longing, the witch is his fear, and both are projections of his inner war. When she refuses to carry these projections, when she steps out of his myth, she destabilizes him completely. You, as a woman, are not required to soften this effect. You are not here to be easier to love. You are not here to rescue him from his confrontation with himself. Your role, if you embrace it, is simply to embody your wholeness, to walk your path of individuation, just as Jung taught, weaving together your light and shadow until you are complete unto yourself. In this you become the storm and the stillness, the silence and the voice, the longing and the refusal. And though men may fear you, what they truly fear is the awakening you stir in them. Remember this: when a man's ego trembles before you, it is not a sign of your cruelty. It is proof of your power. For you have touched the place within him that he has avoided his entire life. Whether he rises to meet it or flees into denial is not your burden to carry. You are not the healer of every man's shadow. You are the embodiment of your own. Type continue to receive the next part. Type continue to receive the next part. The storm eventually clears. What remains is not chaos but clarity. A woman who has walked through silence, detachment, refusal, and transcendence emerges with an unshakable truth. Her worth was never dependent on the gaze of a man. Jung would call this individuation fulfilled, the integration of shadow and light, the reclamation of the soul from projection, the birth of a self whole unto itself. And so she no longer bends under the weight of fear, nor shrinks to make herself easier to hold. She no longer trades her sovereignty for fleeting affection or mistakes her softness for weakness. She becomes both flame and water, capable of love, but never dependent on its return. Her energy flows where it chooses, not where it is demanded. For the men who cannot rise, she is a mystery that unsettles. For the men who dare to confront their shadow, she is the mirror that awakens. But either way, she remains untouchable in her essence, no longer seeking validation from the outside, no longer sacrificing her silence for noise. She knows that her power is not in being desired, but in being whole. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase. She chooses.